true, we're making Halloween cake pops. But don't worry, I'm going to talk you through these kitchen nightmares so there's nothing to be scared of. Hi, I'm Astrid from the Sweet Rebellion, and today we're going to be making some creepy Halloween cake pops. So last week we made our raspberry and lemon mini cakes, and we had quite a lot of cake scraps left over. We're going to use those today to make our Halloween cake pops. Cake pops are basically a mixture of cake crumbs and icing, rolled together to make little balls and then dipped in chocolates. Cake pops were invented by Bakerella, and she's got a great book with more than 40 different types. So as you can see, you can make cake pops for just about any occasion. I learned to make cake pops from Bakerella's recipe, and that's what we're going to be using today. So if you don't have cake scraps, it's great to use a box cake mix because it's more reliable and you get consistent results. And to make the process easier, I'm also going to use store-bought icing. You can get this at your local supermarket or baking store. The first step in making cake pops is to bake your cake. But because we've already got our cake scraps, we don't need to do that today. If you are making your own cake, it's best to make it the night before so that it can cool completely and be ready to use the next day. It's best not to use a super fudgy or moist cake for cake pops. You actually want the mixture to be a little bit dry because you're going to be making it moist with your icing. So if your cake is very sticky and moist, it's best to dry it out in a low oven at about 100 degrees for 20 minutes or so and then let it cool completely. So the ratios of cake and icing that you'll need is 1 standard box cake mix that will make about 2 20-centimeter cakes and 300 grams of icing. But because we're using cake scraps, the other ratio you can use is about 2 cups of cake crumbs to half a cup of icing. To coat your cake pops, we actually don't want to use real chocolate. Instead, I'm going to be using a candy coating or a baking chocolate like this. The reason for that is that chocolate contains cocoa butter and needs to be tempered to get a nice hard crack. Candy coatings are made with vegetable fat, so they melt a lot easier and they also set hard really nicely without having to temper them. You actually need to go to a baking store to get this, and it's called white choc discs. They're not actually allowed to call it chocolate because it doesn't contain cocoa butter. And today we're going to be using some Halloween sprinkles to decorate, as well as these little eyeballs. The other thing you're going to need is some lollipop sticks, which you'll also need to get from a baking store. To start off, we're going to crumble our cake into nice fine crumbs. It's really important that you don't have any bits of cake left, otherwise your cake pops are going to be lumpy. So to do this, we're just going to rub the little bits of cake together between our fingertips until we've got fine crumbs. If you're starting off with a big cake, you're going to want to cut it into quarters and then work with 1 quarter at a time. Today we're going to be coating our cake pops in different colored candy coating, so it's not too important what the inside looks like. However, if you're planning on coating them in a white coating, you actually want to remove your dark bits of cake before crumbling, because otherwise you can have dark spots which are going to show through. While you're busy crumbling your cake, you can just give your bowl a little bit of a shake and all the big bits will come to the top. So once all your cake has broken down into fine crumbs with no bits of cake left, and your texture looks a bit like this, it's ready to add your icing. So I'm going to add 2 cups of crumbs to my bowl, and then I'm going to add half a cup of icing as well. Rather start with a little bit less icing if you're unsure, because if you use too much, your mixture will be too soft and your cake pops will fall apart. So we're going to mix this together now, and the best way to describe this is the way that Preppy Kitchen describes it, which is to kind of pour at the mixture like a cat. So you kind of want to bring it towards you and you're just trying to push that icing into the crumbs. And we're going to keep on doing this until we've got a really nice homogeneous mixture that's not too dry and not too sticky. Just keep adding your icing a tablespoon at a time and mixing really well until you end up with a texture like this, which is like wet sand. When you pick it up, you want to be able to smush it together and it doesn't crumble and fall apart. Next, we're going to roll our mixture into balls, and I'm going to use a small cookie scoop to do this, just to make sure that they're all the same size. Once you've rolled your mixture into balls, you can either place them into the freezer for 15 minutes or into the fridge for 3 to 4 hours. While our cake pops are chilling in the fridge, we're going to get our coating ready. So the best way to melt this, I find, is in the microwave at 30-second intervals, but make sure that you're using a plastic container and not glass. Glass tends to get too hot and you're likely to burn your coating. Just remember to make sure that it's microwave safe. Once our coating is melted, if it is still a little bit too thick, we're going to add about a teaspoon of margarine or shortening. And if you don't have that, you can also use coconut oil. Once our coating is melted, we're going to add some coloring. Just remember when working with chocolate or coating that you can't use water-based food coloring. So instead we're going to use powder coloring, and this you can get at your local baking store. I'm going to work with one color coating at a time, and also I'm just going to take out 6 cake pops so that they don't all sit and get warm at room temperature. For dipping your cake pops, it helps to use either a little jar or cup so that you can get a nice deep layer of coating, which makes it a lot easier to dip. So I'm just going to decant my coating from the melting container into a little glass jar. Once we dip our cake pops into the coating, we're going to need a place to put them to dry. What I like to use is a styrofoam block and just poke some holes in it beforehand so that once I've dipped it, I can just easily place the stick there. I got this at my local baking store, but you can also use a cardboard box and just punch some holes in it. These are ready to dip now because they're nice and firm, but just make sure that they're not frozen. If you try and dip your cake pop into your coating when it's frozen, it's going to crack. So to make sure that our cake pop sticks nicely to our lollipop stick, we're going to dip it into a little bit of our coating first and then push it just halfway through the cake pop. If you push it too far, the cake pop will actually break and fall apart. Because the cake pop is cold, the coating will set in the middle right away and you can start to dip. And just a note on dipping, be cautious not to stir it when you put it in your coating, but rather just dip it in and out. If you start to stir it, there's a chance that your cake pop is going to fall off the stick. After you've dipped your cake pop, you want to work quite quickly because the coating sets really fast. So make sure that you're going to add your decorations while the coating is still wet. And then after you've added your decorations, you're going to place your cake pop here to dry and carry on with your next one. Don't store your cake pops in the fridge. It's best to store them at room temperature. That's because the moisture in the fridge will condense into your coating and add a white residue, which doesn't look good. If your cake pops crack, you can just use a toothpick to add a little bit of coating to the crack and then smooth it over with your finger. Or if you haven't added your decorations yet, you can just dip it for a second time. As you add your cold cake pops to your warm coating, it will sometimes cool the coating down, and you may need to reheat it in the microwave just for 5 to 10 seconds. And there you have it, your creepy Halloween cake pops. Not only do they look super cute, but they actually taste amazing. As you can see, cake pops are quite a lot of work, but I'm sure you'll agree that it's totally worth it. So if you guys are brave enough to try making cake pops, please remember to tag me on social media and let me know what your favorite Halloween treats are in the comments.